Enterprise Management 360.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Tech Chat. Now this is part one of a two-part series and we're here at Big Data London 2019. Now we're going to be discussing everything from obviously big data to AI to cloud integrations, and also we're going to be looking at the fourth Industrial Revolution report, which was co-produced by Cloudera and Big Data London. So let's get started with our first set of interviews. Hello, I'm now joined by Abbas Ricky from Cloudera. Thank you very much for joining me. We're here today to discuss the fourth Industrial Revolution report, which was done in conjunction with Cloudera. So with the report coming out, I wanted to find out from yourself what's the biggest takeaway from this fourth Industrial report.
So this year we've made slight changes, and one of the key things that we've done is we've focused on the cloud. So if you look at the big tech trends which are coming out, cloud by far eclipses majority of them. And the two big things which came out of that, one was what kind of workloads are moving into the cloud, analytical, operational, and what the impacts are. And second is, do organizations need to have a cloud strategy by use cases and workloads rather than by business units? Because that has a massive impact on the cloud TCO, and that's mentioned in the report this year.
So obviously cloud is a major aspect that we're looking at the moment, but what type of workloads are moving onto the cloud and why?
So what we've seen as part of the report is a lot of the workloads which are analytical in nature, they're moving to public cloud. And that makes sense because if you assume why are people moving to the cloud in the first place, that's because of agility. That's not necessarily because of cost or anything else. And if you have an analytical workloads, and you want to have speed to market or time to innovation, it makes sense for you to move on to public cloud. But if you look at operational workloads, which have been the bread and butter for a lot of the legacy industries for decades now, you can't just lift and shift. And it also has an impact on the cost because you have to consider business continuity, you have to consider risk, and you also have to understand what the dynamics will look like, whether it's IaaS or on-premise or PaaS. So one of the common things that we've seen is if you have a workload such as cybersecurity and you're going to run that 24/7, 365 any which ways, you're probably better off doing that on your current on-premise estate rather than moving on to public cloud. However, if you have a net new workload which is very analytical in nature, the public cloud makes more sense, even from a cost perspective, because you can spin up and down. So that is what we call as a lighthouse workload, whereby you can take the advantages of public cloud and not paying for the entire infrastructure utilization, but actually paying for what you're consuming. But the fundamental thing is, you've got to prepare your cloud strategy at a use case workload level and not just allocate it based on large business units or functions or P&Ls or whatever the case might be.
So another element of the report looked at the ephemeral workloads, and I just want to get from your perspective, why does that matter?
So as I mentioned in a previous response, people go to cloud to take advantage of the elasticity, and that has a massive impact on compute. Ephemeral workloads are key because that is where you can spin up and down your workloads and take advantage both from an economics perspective, but also from optimization of your resources that you have. Now it's important to understand, for the purpose of the report, we've broken that down by different types of ephemerality. What that means is, if you have a persistent workload, you're going to run it for a very long time. But if you have an ephemeral workload, you'll need to understand whether it runs for 4 hours a day, whether it runs for 8 hours a day, or 12 hours a day. So there are certain use cases like risk reporting where you'll probably have to run for X number of hours once a week or once a month. There are a few others like single view of the customer whereby you're doing segmentation analysis and you probably run them for a few days or whatever the case might be. In the report, what we've also called out is that there is a specific cutoff at a certain point beyond which your ephemeral workloads are either cheaper or expensive to run on public cloud. Now that varies by industry, that varies by use case, and that varies by your total cost of ownership. However, we've done an analysis for one of the large financial services customers, and we found out that the cutoff was 13 and a half hours, So any workload which is running for more than 62% of the time, on-premise was supposedly cheaper rather than public cloud. So therefore, it is a larger, broader understanding of the multiple factors or the nuances is what is important, rather than just focusing on whether it's ephemeral or persistent.
So I'm joined now by Justin and Pratim. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. First point I think is a good starting point is to, first of all, get an understanding of the relationship between Microsoft and Unravel.
Yep, absolutely. So let me take that one. So first of all, the relationship between the two companies came about predominantly as an investor. So Microsoft Ventures, now M12, have been an investor and a supporter of Unravel for some time. And that's evolved then with, I guess, the advent of what we offer around data insights for big data platforms into a partnership with Microsoft where we are working with the Microsoft team to assist organizations in their movement to the cloud with a data-driven approach.
If you think about it, the big data technologies, how they have evolved and how cloud has accelerated those, I mean, it's become reasonably easy. What is still very difficult is the manageability of it. It's almost like few clicks, you can run a data lake, and you can scale up to unlimited with the cloud. But how to really go into fine-grained, really understand, controls, how do you manage and maintain those sort of systems is very important. As a result, this is a very great place for us to have this partnership.
Yes, absolutely.
So just I kind of want to get your thoughts on this matter from a perspective of what key trends are we seeing across Europe with big data tech adoption?
Big data on the cloud is now the reality. If you look at the Gartner trends over the last few years, is that's where everything is happening. So you see the cloud providers obviously taking that big share of the Hadoop Spark ecosystem, obviously. The other thing I would say is very important is if you see the importance in open source is like Spark, Hadoop leading all those things as well, and how the enterprise vendors are wrapping those up into making those very, very usable.
Big data is really front and center to most organizations. The question is now, where should I deploy that environment? If I'm driving mission critical applications, how do I drive down the TCO based on the business outcome I'm trying to derive, which is what, and I think the most recent things that are front of mind to all of our clients is, now that I'm managing my data effectively, how do I use the cloud and what applications do I best deploy in the cloud with my data environment to truly leverage the flexibility that the cloud offers? Where do I sit with data governance? Where do I sit with data security? How do I control the restrictions in different geographies? Having strong data privacy rules in certain geographies versus more open and collaborative rules in other geographies. So that's where we're seeing, working with organizations like Microsoft and managing the on-prem cloud hybrid environment being really critical to organizations, but understanding how that's best executed is really important to most organizations as well.
So obviously another important element whenever we have the cloud discussion is how do companies best approach on-prem to the cloud?
And I think what people are beginning to see is that they're learning from the lessons of the past. And what I mean by that is when people move from an enterprise data warehouse technology to an open source Hadoop technology, they kind of did it in a trial, fail, adjust type mechanism. It wasn't data driven. Where we've partnered as two organizations is because we collect the data of the on-prem environment, being an application performance management organization, we can apply that data insight to how you best move those applications or which applications are best deployed within the cloud, driven by the business outcome.
The only thing I can add is, you can also use data to measure the success, and the other thing is not to get too stuck in the early stages with analysis paralysis, like, oh, what shall I do? There are so many options and all stuff. That is the value of the cloud, right? So the cost of innovation is not huge. So you can try something, and if that works, then you iterate on top of it. If that doesn't work, you can completely get rid of the whole environment and start fresh again. So and the tools and technologies are out there to give you good direction to get started immediately as we speak. So.
Well, thank you both for taking the time to talk to me today and giving your insights on the cloud. It's been really insightful learning from you, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you guys. And that's a wrap here for episode 1 at Big Data London. Make sure you stay tuned to this YouTube channel for episode 2 coming shortly. Now also head on over to en360tech.com in the meantime for more great content.